Hundreds of people in the Nkanini informal settlement in Lwandle face a bleak Easter weekend after a fire has torn through the informal settlement, destroying their informal homes. Some affected residents say while they managed to save some belongings, many of their neighbours lost everything. For more, we cross to our reporter Vanessa Poonah. Good afternoon, Vanessa. Thanks for joining us. What's the situation like there now?
Yes, good afternoon to you. The wind's starting to come up here, and of course coupled with hot weather in Nkanini informal settlement in Lwandle in Strand. This of course is where yesterday morning residents tell us at around 8 o'clock, shortly after a fire broke out in this informal settlement. We understand that it started at to my right hand side and then spread as the wind carried the flames to other homes, other informal structures. Now the exact tally is not yet known, but I have on standby with me the ward councillor in this area, Nkanini. But just a second before that, you've mentioned that it's a bleak day. It's also on the brink of a bleak Easter weekend, because some of the residents have told us that many had planned to visit the Eastern Cape over this weekend. It's a religious festival for some, but it's also a time to spend time with family, some living in the other province. Councillor, I bring you in here now. Of course, a terrible thing to have happened on the eve of this Easter long weekend. And of course, just what some people have been telling me is that the fire actually started behind you, closer to the road over there. What do you know? And I understand that you were also on site yesterday.
Yes, good afternoon to the viewers. Indeed, today is a very sad day for the people of Ward 86, in particular the people of Nkanini. It's correct that the fire started yesterday around 8 a.m. I must say that the firefighters, they managed to arrive on time. I was here on the scene, but unfortunately, the situation that we find ourselves in was very uncongenious and very difficult, where we find a very heavy wind coming out of nowhere. So yes, indeed, it's a very bad situation. And also, what also makes it very bad is that we're approaching an Easter weekend, and most of our people normally in these times, they go to Eastern Cape, they prepare themselves to go to Eastern Cape, and they go prepare themselves to go to other provinces for church services. So they don't have anything, everything that they have in their disposal has been demolished, has been destroyed through this fire. It's a very difficult situation.
I understand that humanitarian help is being given to people at a nearby community hall in terms of hot meals and so on. But I also see that people are trying desperately to rebuild. And we've seen in previous fires, there's always been this request for people not to use these burnt out debris, the burnt out corrugated iron sheeting, as it does pose a danger. But at this stage, people may feel as though they have no other choice. What is happening in terms of the distribution of fire starter kits? Because some people are saying that they are waiting on those building materials.
You are indeed correct. When one finds himself in such a situation, he or she will use whatever that might come his or her way. You're correct that this material that are using now possess a very huge risk. Hence, we are only appealing to the National Department of Human Settlement to expedite the process of getting our people fire kits. As you know, that the South Cape Town no longer give fire kits to our people. So the only appeal that we are making, and the only assent that we know that we want to get is from the National Human Settlement, the Department of National Settlement nationally, to provide our people with material, and they did in other incidents. So we are hoping that, as they said, the president of making sure that our people get the material on time, hope this process is going to be expedited by the National Human Settlement Department.
Councillor, how many people are we talking about? Because we understand that the numbers are still being verified.
Look, yesterday with the area committees, we were just doing head counts. As you see that on site, there are officials from Informal Settlement. They are doing counting the structure that has been affected. Yesterday, when we were doing the head count, it was 560, but we were still counting. As you know, that per structure, you will find that not less than 3 people who are residing in the structure, 4 or 5. So we don't know the number of the structure being destroyed at the moment, but we know it's plus minus 200 or above. But the head count of people that we managed to do yesterday, it was more than 560, but we're still counting. So we've got 560 people that have been displaced. whom we ask any good humanitarian out there to come and assist our people. As you know that the very first point of call when we have such situation is always the gift of the givers. They were on scene since yesterday, the money to give our people supper. As we speak now today, they are in the Lwandle community hall trying to distribute blankets, mattresses for our people because they've got nothing. Some of them, they sleep on the floor yesterday with no blankets, with no mattresses. So the gift of givers, they are currently at the community hall of Lwandle distributing blankets and also mattresses for our people so that at least at night they've got something to sleep on.
Councillor, for people to rebuild, and this is just my last question, I know that you have to go and assist the community, but people are trying to rebuild on the very same spot. We understand people don't want to lose their plots, but part of the reason, time and time again, that we hear these fires spreading so rapidly is because there's no space between the informal homes. What are you doing in terms of enlightening this community or appealing to them to adhere to not doing that, to make sure that there are fire breaks, etc., in when they rebuild?
Look, we need to face the reality, and you are correct to say that more special, this informal settlement called Nkanini stock is Latliwe. It was very dense, you know. It was very dense, structures were close to each other. Hence, most of the firefighters could not manage to get inside to extinguish fire because it was very dense. So we had a kind of a meeting yesterday where we appeal to the residents that when they are rebuilding their structure, at least they must leave space in between. And also, we find that there are fire hydrants that are underneath their structures. So we call upon the water department to come on board to identify the fire hydrants so that our people can at least when they build their structure, they should not build on top of the fire hydrant, so that in any event where there might be fire in future, fire department or fire trucks can be able to go in those fire hydrants and connect so that they can access water immediately. Part of the problem that we had yesterday is because the fire hydrants were not accessible. That is why we find ourselves in such a situation. But we spoke with our people yesterday that at least now, when they build or rebuild their structures, they should at least give 5-meter distance from one structure to another structure, just to give a way for any event that might happen in future.
Councillor Nkanini, so thank you so much for speaking to me. Of course, they're just giving us an update with regards to this tragic situation that faces the community of Nkanini here in Lwandle, in Strand, of course, trying to rebuild after the devastating fire ripped through this informal settlement yesterday.
Thanks very much. That was our reporter Vanessa Poonah and video journalist Lukhanyo Mazantsana chatting to us from the Western Cape. Terrible situation there. Hundreds of people losing their homes in Lwandle, in the Nkanini informal settlement. And as you can see by those visuals, desperately trying to rebuild their homes ahead of the Easter weekend.